As a mom, a single mom and entrepreneur in Kelowna, Crystelle juggles life as best she can while working the proverbial tightrope. Mother of two amazing girls, director of a surgical import company, and owner operator of the new-to-Kelowna Body Bar Laser Clinic, Crystelle absolutely loves talking about skin, anti-aging, and how to help men and women age as gracefully as possible. In addition to a laser clinic, Crystelle is also soon opening the Kelowna campus of Body Bar Laser Academy to train and certify others to share their passion for lasers. There may not be holy grails to eternal. What? That's why I'm confused. No, you're missing the point. I'm telling her, how come there's no holy grail to eternal youth? That's why I'm getting. But there most definitely is a lot we can do today with technology to look as good as possible at any age. Welcome, Crystelle.
Yay.
Yeah.
Thanks, fella.
Hello, everyone. I believe I'm the last co-author speaker tonight, so thank you to everybody here. Thank you for supporting us through this, and just a couple of moments to thank you two lovely humans. In speaking to co-authors over the last day and a half, I think it's been an incredible experience for all of us. It was very cathartic for me. It was difficult, but definitely worth it. And not only did the two of you go through it yourselves, but then you did this, and you lifted all of us to this and carried it all. So thank you.
I'm
going to use this podium for my story. So for nearly 17 years, I loved a man deeply. A great partner, a devoted father, and I would say probably just a real unrelenting force of nature. When I first met him, it was as if time itself had stopped. And I'm curious, show of hands, who here believes in love at first sight? I was 24 years old. I'd been trying to get hired with this one company for about 8 months. First interviews, second interviews, group interviews, personality tests, cognitive assessments, IQ tests. Finally, I get hired. Again, I'm 24. Day 3 on the job is a national sales meeting in Banff. So I make my way out to Banff, get there, and first night is social gathering at St. James Pub. So I make my way to St. James Pub. We're in the back room of the pub. I'm surrounded by about 60, 70 people that I've been dying to work with for the last 8 months. I'm finally here. This is amazing. Chatting away with a bunch of people. As the night progresses, the sound in the room gets louder and louder. Drinks and consumption is occurring. And I'm in conversation probably around midnight. And I'm deep in conversation, and it's as if the entire room all of a sudden erupts and yells out, "Steve!" It was right out of an episode of Cheers. So, of course, I look up to see this guy coming around the corner. And I went, "Oh, crap, I'm in trouble." And he felt it too. It was a connection that was intoxicating. It was thrilling. And we built a life together, filled with laughter, love, dreams. We were partners in every sense of the word. We worked together. We flipped houses. We did lots of renovations together. So we'd buy places, do the weekend warrior thing, sell them, make money, do it all over again. We parented pretty darn well together. And as far as our careers went, we would challenge each other, set goals, support each other to reach those goals, and then set loftier ones. But as many of you know, and as many people have talked about it over the last day and a half, life has a funny way of throwing curveballs our way. Our relationship, which once flourished, became overshadowed by the dark grip of addiction. He was a high-functioning alcoholic until he wasn't high-functioning anymore. As the years rolled on, I found myself holding on to hope, believing that we could navigate even this storm together because we'd done everything else together. I believed in balance, that the light and the dark could coexist. I blame the Libra in me for that. But I learned that love alone is not enough to heal. It wasn't until a shocking morning when reality really hit me, when I inadvertently reached for his coffee mug at 8 in the morning, only to realize it wasn't coffee, but straight gin. It was a moment that crystallized everything for me. We were in big trouble. The man I loved was slipping away, and there's nothing I could do to stop it. I was losing him. Days turned into nights filled with anxiety and fear, a lot of sleepless nights for me. I tiptoed around our house, walking on eggshells, always afraid of setting him off. My days were spent in a fog of worry and attempts at trying to fix a situation that was beyond my control. I hired interventionists. I read countless self-help books, desperately trying to bring him back. I thought naively that if I loved him enough, he would choose to change. But addiction is a complex beast. He wouldn't do it for me. He wouldn't do it for our girls. And as his addiction deepened, I lost sight of myself. My own self began to erode. I became a shadow of who I'd been because I was so desperate for a glimpse of the man I'd known and still loved. One day, after a particularly devastating and disappointing failed intervention, I finally packed my bags and those of my girls. And walking away was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. But I realized that to preserve my own sanity, I had to let go of the person I'd once loved, because he turned into something I barely recognized. He was always a very charismatic man, a very eloquent individual, but he'd become a master manipulator, skilled at convincing me and others that it was actually our reactions to his actions that were the problem. We were being overly dramatic. At the time, through his many drunken rants and monologues, usually aimed at me, I was routinely left questioning my own sanity. Maybe it was all my fault. Maybe I was the one leading him to drink. I'd forced a separation of our family. Was it even necessary? Was I wired wrong and just unable to understand him and give him what he needed? But there comes a time when even the most loyal person has to think about self-preservation. The person I once loved thrived on causing exponentially more pain, more hurt than good. I could never be sure what mood he'd be in or how intoxicated he'd get every single day. And I had reached the point where I was tired of being the only one trying to fix things. He wasn't mine to fix. He wasn't mine to save. And I wasn't able to save him. 2 years after that failed intervention, and 2 years after the girls and I left, a loud knock came at my door in the middle of the night, and 2 RCMP officers came into my house to tell me he'd passed away. I collapsed because what was I going to tell our girls? Your dad drank himself to death. And then a wave of resentment hit me. Resentment and so much anger that he had thrown away and wasted such a beautiful life on that frickin' blue bottle. The journey through that heartbreak was harrowing. And in all fairness, it started years before he actually passed. But here's a bit of what I've learned. And I know there are a few of you that have talked about this today and yesterday. Healing is not linear. It's messy. It's unpredictable. And it's often very, very painful. I learned that my hurt couldn't be rushed. It couldn't be dismissed. I think Anita brought up the idea of a fast forward button. So many times I wanted to manifest a fast forward button and just push that button to get through this. But I couldn't. I had to sit with it. I had to allow myself to process every single piece of that hurt and that heartbreak. In moments of probably my deepest despair, I used to remind myself that this too shall pass. It became my anchor, my reminder that every storm eventually clears. To be really poetic, every dark night eventually gives way to dawn. I began to understand that my happiness couldn't be contingent on someone else's choices. It had to be mine. I firmly believe that the universe, maybe for you it's God or something else, but for me it's the universe. The universe only dishes out as much as we can take. Took me a while. That little nugget took a while to sink in and for me to process. And I didn't always feel that way, especially when I was smack dab in the middle of something that felt completely unsurmountable. But trusting that I could get through whatever was happening to me did help. And repeating to myself that this too would pass gave me some comfort, and I leaned into it. Today I stand before you, not just as a survivor of this crazy storm, but as someone who has emerged stronger. I'm more resilient, and I'm ready to accept whatever comes my way. I'm still working on setting boundaries, but I do try and do a better job of prioritizing myself, my well-being, and definitely nurturing and loving my daughters the way they deserve to be. So to anyone navigating similar waters, whether you're going through addiction or you have a loved one that you're trying to help going through addiction, remember that sometimes it's okay to let go. Sometimes loving someone means letting go so they can go on their own journey, even if it seems really hard to do. Alcoholism is a hidden illness that touches countless lives. It is so pervasive in our society. Let's not turn a blind eye to it. Let's talk about it. Let's support one another. And let's remind ourselves that no matter how dark things do get, this too shall pass. Ooh.
Thank you, Crystelle.
Yes, thank you. So powerful.
I was thinking, well, as you know, your story when I first read it, it triggered the fuck out of me. And and so I had to say, to the editor, can you read this? I can't do it right now. And so I had to walk away from it. And I think that for me, what really resonated, or I don't know, I'm still sort of trying to figure out what it was. But I think that what you taught me is, you know, addiction is effing chaos, as you know, and it affects not only the person in addiction, and it affects the family and everybody around them. And it's hard when you're in the person in addiction to find compassion for the people that you're hurting because you're just doing your thing, right? And I think after I read yours, what I realized later as I went back to it, and I found compassion for like my ex-husband, for everything that he went through. And especially when you say, you know, it does turn somebody into somebody they weren't. And it's hard as the person that's addicted, I think, to come to terms and reckoning with that. So,
well, you called it drunk Alex.
Yeah, drunk Al, right? And so when I went back to it, I thought, oh, you know, that's what it is. And I was able to like feed love into, like breathe love into him for his experience. And so I really, your story really touched me, and it doesn't trigger me anymore. When I read it, I was like, you know what? Freaking addiction touches so many people. It's everywhere, like you're saying. And you know, there's support needed for all sides, right? Yeah. So thank you for your heart and pouring your soul and sharing your story. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What really got me today is that when you said we can't fix people, they need to want to fix themselves. And we so desperately sometimes try to take our loved ones on a journey that we want them on, but it's not their journey to travel. And the hardest thing to do is to let them go. It's like with children and parenting as well. You know, we want the best for them, we guide them, but they not always want to do what we want them to do. So it is hard to let that go. So I really commend you for actually leaving and saying, I choose me and my children. Right? So, yeah.
How do you think that people can support families and individuals going with addiction, like in a family?
Oh,
addiction?
That's hard. And we went through this, it was like 2019, 2020.
Yeah.
Right? So everyone was in bubbles, and I would have loved, Doria's not here today, but Doria made a comment yesterday where she said, you know, just take 3 seconds and go, hey, you okay? Mm-hmm. I didn't have anybody doing that because we were all isolated in these COVID bubbles. So my girls and I were going through this, and we were on our own. Mm-hmm. So I think, as I just sort of closed off saying, let's not turn a blind eye to it. Talk about things. I talk about addiction. I talk about alcoholism a lot more now. And that's why I say it's so pervasive, because everyone I talk to either knows someone or is or very, very closely related to someone going through it. So talking to people, making them understand that it's okay, you can reach out. Yes, there's specialists, but sometimes, you know, they're hard to get into, or they're hard to see, or you're ashamed to go and see them. But hopefully families that are struggling have someone they can talk to kind of help unload a little bit.
Yeah. And I think sort of like you're doing now, the more people talk about it, there's a spectrum too with addiction, right? So it's substance abuse. So if people are out there, it's sometimes that people think it has to be so black and white, that one thing or the other thing, right? And if the more we talk about it, the more we say it doesn't have to look like, you know, the destruction in this or the destruction in my life. It can look like several different things. And the more we bring awareness to that and say it doesn't have to just be this one black or white thing, I think the more we do raise, like you're saying, the consciousness that this is a lot of places, that type of abuse, substance abuse, addiction, alcoholism, whatever you want to call it, exists. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really all about starting the conversation in any topic.
Yep.
And that's why we're here, right? Like, we've had 20 speakers pour their hearts out, and when we look at the room and talk to those who were witnessing the conversations, they said they could pick out nuggets in every single one's story, because we're so intertwined as human beings. We are touched by every situation in some shape or form. So,
But I will add to that, alcoholism for years was something we swept under the rug. And even with my kids, and, you know, people can judge if they want, but my 9-year-old knows that when her father was alive, the fact that he couldn't walk down a grocery store aisle without stumbling and bumping into things was not normal. You know, I have a girlfriend whose father passed away from alcoholism, and yet, even in his death, her mother refuses to acknowledge that her dad was an alcoholic. So I don't want to do that with my kids. We talk about substance abuse, and we talk about the fact that their father drank too much alcohol.
Yeah, I think it is important to speak the truth.
Yeah.
Not sugarcoat it.
Yeah, no,
Not
exactly.
sugarcoat it like we're doing here today.
Right?
Yeah.
Just right in there.
Yeah, and no matter what, I think, like you're saying, Bella, people can relate to any story, even if it isn't their experience or we all have something that we're, going through that's that chaos, or that where we felt like we lost it all, or we had to grieve somebody or let that person go, or so. I think it's all powerful stuff.
Yeah. So
thank you.
Thank you, girls.
Yeah, and thank you for sponsoring. Yes. And go visit Crystelle for your proverbial fountain of youth.